happy to take any questions that people might have.
On the NBN raids, Senator Conroy's confirmed that your unreleased NBN policy was one of the documents in his office. And we have had it confirmed by the AFP that there was an NBN staffer there that has forwarded on some of the photos that he took of documents. Are you worried that your unreleased policy could have been sent around to some people in NBN, maybe to the Liberal Party? Are you concerned it might get leaked before you can announce it?
Well, your question goes to a whole range of the matters and the very extraordinary developments we've seen in the last 36 hours. But today, we've seen explosive revelations that Senator Fifield, Malcolm Turnbull's hand-picked Minister for Communications, knew about the police investigation and NBN Co's actions 6 months ago. It is inconceivable, it is totally implausible that Senator Fifield, a close confidant of Mr Turnbull, Communications Minister following on from Malcolm Turnbull, was not aware of the police investigation in NBN, and he's confirmed that, and it is even more inconceivable that he wouldn't have communicated this fact to Mr Turnbull or any member of his staff. Otherwise, we'd be led to believe that there can be major police investigations triggered by government business enterprises responsible to the Minister and formally the Prime Minister's own responsibility, and that they wouldn't tell the Prime Minister or his staff. It's either gross incompetence or indeed it's far worse, and we're not being told the truth. Mr Turnbull needs to realise that Australians won't let him run and hide from the truth, that Australians are distinctly and deeply unimpressed, that this government and Mr Turnbull will go to such lengths to hide the truth from Australians. The public have a right to know, the media have a right to publish. Mr Turnbull needs to come clean and explain what he knows and what he's been told, or indeed what his staff or his representatives have been told.
You effectively think the Prime Minister was lying yesterday when he said he didn't hear of any of this until the AFP called him on Thursday night?
I believe that the Prime Minister is completely embarrassed by the revelations that his flagship project, the signature activity that he has taken in public life as a politician, the NBN, I think he is deeply embarrassed and humiliated that his incompetence is emerging. The fact that the NBN, he promised would cost $29 billion in 2013, is now costing $56 billion and climbing. The fact that Australia has slipped under his watch from having internet speeds which were ranked 30th in the world, Australia was ranked 30th, have now plummeted to 60th. The fact that the delays, he promised that many more Australians, millions of Australians, would have access to NBN, and they simply haven't. It is clear to me that this government wants to keep the truth from the Australian people, and Labor is determined to get to the bottom of the matter.
Is it right that Mitch Fifield would have been aware of this? As a Minister of a department, wouldn't you be expecting to be told that your department had instigated an investigation with the police?
You would expect that. The idea that the government's trying to pretend that now it's all hit the fan, that somehow NBN Co is unrelated to the government. Whenever there was a supposed good news story about NBN Co, from the Parliament to the streets of Australia, you would see a traffic jam of coalition ministers in white cars fronting up for the photo opportunity. But now all of a sudden the truth's coming out, that the project is bloated, it is slower, that the promises haven't been kept. They're now trying to pretend that they wouldn't have an idea what's going on at the NBN Co. It doesn't pass the pub test, does it?
Sorry, Laura. Have you had from the AFP that those photographs that were taken by the NBN Co employee have been deleted? Are you confident that they have?
Well, the lawyers are working through with the investigating authorities, and I want to make it clear here. Mr Turnbull's trying to say that somehow this is an argument between the Labor Party and the AFP. It's not. This is an argument between Mr Turnbull, the Labor Party and the Australian people. The people of Australia just deserve to know what's really gone on. This is the biggest Commonwealth infrastructure project we've seen. Australians surely have a right to know what's going on. If NBN is working, why are they hiding the truth? The reality is, unfortunately, a far, far less pretty picture than that. We've seen that the NBN Co, under Mr Turnbull's stewardship, doubled in cost, billions and billions of dollars. The promised speeds to many more Australian households just haven't materialised. So in terms of the processes, the lawyers are going through the the processes. We're going to make sure that there's been no illegality rendered towards the collection of the evidence. But fundamentally, we put responsibility for this matter back at the feet of the government, the NBN Co and Mr Turnbull. Why are they fighting so hard to deny telling the media and Australians what's really going on? What is so damaging, other than just Mr Turnbull's own ego and pride, telling Australians that they've stuffed it up, that they've actually doubled the cost and slowed the speeds and taken Australia backwards? That's the real issue here, Joe.
Mr Shorten, Mitch Fifields put out a statement today. He says that the referral to the AFP was made by the NBN management. He did not instruct them, and that as an AFP investigation was underway, he did not advise other ministers or the Prime Minister. Do you accept that?
Well, I think there are many more facts to come out. Obviously, the media has been chasing Senator Fifield, and you've extracted from him statements today that he didn't want to give yesterday. There's clearly more going on here than meets the eye. And the fundamental matter is this. Why is Mr Turnbull throwing everything he can at making sure that the people of Australia don't find out the hash he's made of the NBN? He's got questions to answer, not only about the process, but about the substance. I think there's many Australians, I know there are many Australians, who are frustrated that the promises of the NBN rollout coming to their suburbs, their small businesses, their schools, just haven't materialised. Mr Turnbull is deeply embarrassed by the revelations which the media printed earlier in the year, and he's doing everything he can to make sure that Australians aren't looking at the substance.
A spokesperson for NBN Co has suggested that they were following orders from the AFP and taking photos of those documents under parliamentary privilege. Does that raise further questions about the AFP's conduct?
Well, now you've got the government, through the NBN, trying to blame the AFP. Let's get to the bottom of the matter. What is so secret and so objectionable that Australians don't deserve to know the facts about how money's being spent, how promises are being broken, how Australia's not moving forward in the 21st century, but we're slipping backwards? Why is the government so determined to prevent Australians knowing what's really going on with the NBN? Mr Turnbull should travel with me to regional Australia and the suburbs of Australia. He should see the frustration that Australians express about not being able to access the sort of internet services which many other countries are now taken for granted. Under this Mr Turnbull's management, under this Liberal government, the internet services in Australia are not keeping pace with the rest of the world, and we cannot afford another 3 years of Liberal incompetence and waste and mismanagement. We've already slipped backwards 30 places in the world in the first 3 years, and I'm determined to put the case why we shouldn't slip back further by giving the Liberals another 3 years to not tell us the truth, to hide the facts, and indeed to take our internet services and our expansion into the future backwards, not forwards.
But isn't it true, Mr Shorten, that Penny Wong once written a letter from the AFP saying that these photos have been deleted? Just to go back to Lauren's question, have you sought any assurances or have you been given any that those photos have been deleted? And why isn't a verbal confirmation from the Commissioner something that would suffice over a letter?
Well, let's be straightforward here. Very serious matters have been alleged. There's a serious investigation. Australians are still entitled to protect their rights. And the fundamental issue is, why are we even having this process? Why is the government so determined to bury in secrecy, to be dragged kicking and screaming on a daily basis to tell us more than they were willing to tell us yesterday, and who knows what they'll tell us tomorrow? The point about it is that this government, and Mr Turnbull in particular, are very sensitive about the exposure and the embarrassment of an incompetently administered national broadband network. Because the obvious point is, Malcolm Turnbull, in charge of the big expansion, the biggest project, it's been incompetently done, and if he can do that to the NBN and double the cost, if he can not keep his promises, if we can see Australia go backwards, imagine what he'll do over the next 3 years if he's in charge of the whole country.
If the public has a right to know, why is Labor claiming parliamentary privilege over the documents?
The documents, well, we want to know. We've got a right to preserve the processes of a parliamentary democracy. But let's be very clear, the documents which are triggering this government interest have been published online. This is the government shutting the gate after the horses bolted because they were humiliated and angry at being exposed for their inaction over the last 2.5 years. And this government and this Prime Minister should not be rewarded for perpetuating a secrecy of culture, for keeping the truth about their mismanagement from the Australian people.
Have you seen the leaked documents? Was a copy sent to your office?
I haven't seen them, no.
Do you expect that there will be
But
raids
I
of
understand
other...
I can download most of them from reputable media sites. In fact, I understand that no less than 4 media outlets have been named in some of the documents. The real issue here is, why is Mr Turnbull so keen for Australians not to find out that on his watch he doubled the cost of the NBN, $29 billion in 2013, he said, $56 billion. These are not small amounts of money. The fact that Australia has slipped from 30th to 60th in terms of our internet service offerings. The fact that millions of Australians, and come with me to Frankston in Dunkley, come with me to Bendigo, come with me to the Central Coast where I was last night, come with me to the marginal seats of Australia. They were persuaded to vote Liberal on the promise of a better NBN, and what they've got is a worse service.
Were these claims about
Lauren.
This morning, Bill, he said that by Stephen Conroy claiming parliamentary privilege, he was trying to keep police away from the documents that were, to quote, clearly stolen. Can I just get your response to that?
I tell you what, I give points for Mr Turnbull being brassy and confident. The whole debate is about documents that Mr Turnbull was humiliated and angry about being in the public gaze. Then he's got an arm of the government launching a police inquiry. And somehow he says that it's everyone else's fault. This is classic Turnbull at his best. Whenever something goes wrong, it's someone else's fault. The reality is, he was the gentleman in charge of the NBN. He's in charge of the cost blowout. He's in charge of the delays. He's in charge of Australia going backwards in terms of the internet. And he needs to take responsibility rather than taking Australia all over the paddock, looking everywhere else except his own performance.
Questions remaining about Mr Turnbull's performance when he was Communications Minister. Why do you think he's still 17 points ahead of you as preferred Prime Minister in the Fairfax Ipsos poll?
Listen, we are the underdog in this election. There can be no doubt about that. We're now 2 weeks into the election, and as I go around Australia talking to Australians about Labor's positive plans, there is a distinct awakening of interest in an alternative. I understand it's a hard fight, it's a big climb to win 20 seats, but for me it's about Labor putting forward real choices in this election. There is a real difference between Malcolm Turnbull supporting $50 billion in tax cuts for the big end of town and Labor wanting to support and keep bulk billing and Medicare. There's a big difference between Mr Turnbull proposing as a budget measure that he decrease the tax burden, give a $17,000 tax cut to someone earning $1 million next year, yet provide nothing for anyone who earns less than $80,000 a year. I am looking forward to the next 6 weeks, a chance to offer Australians a positive alternative in education, in jobs, in Medicare, in renewable energy, in fair taxation and first home affordability.
The opposition leader, why do you think you didn't receive those documents, considering they were pretty widely shopped around?
Well, let's be clear here. I read the newspapers and I could see what a hash that Mr Turnbull's made of the NBN. And again, I now see that Mr Turnbull, he's the person who's ultimately got the most to lose by documents being revealed. He's the person who is most embarrassed. At the end of the day, what you've got to understand is who benefits by the suppression of these documents? Mr Turnbull. Who benefits from not having a debate in the public about the incompetent management of NBN, the cost and the delays? Mr Turnbull. This is all about protecting Mr Turnbull's reputation. But in the meantime, I just think Australians deserve to know the truth, and you trust Australians then, once they know the facts, to make decisions. So perhaps one last question.
Do you suspect the Prime Minister has been directly involved in either these raids or this investigation?
His government's been involved in it. Now, Mr Turnbull may say that it's his government for the purposes of good news, but it's not his government for the purposes of bad news. For me, it's all about the Australian people. 24 million Australians deserve to have better internet services. They don't deserve to have the cost of the NBN double from $29 billion to $56 billion. They deserve to have the promises kept that this government made 3 years ago. Australians deserve to know the facts. The media have a right to publish the facts. And what is most important here is that if the last 3 years has been a hash with the NBN, and unarguably it has, goodness knows what happens if we give Mr Turnbull and his Liberal team of incompetence another 3 years to muck up our internet and NBN. Thank you, everybody. See you a bit later.
That is the federal opposition leader Bill Shorten there speaking in Sydney South, answering questions predominantly over the NBN leak and the ensuing AFP investigation.